Welcome to Proof Live, where booze brands in the right hands. On a quest for the best tipple and toast with the most exciting and respected bottlings. Competing for the 100-point Perfect Score Century Award and the double gold and a spot on the top shelf to be sipped, shaken, stirred, and celebrated. Slide up to the bar with the biggest names in the spirits game as they clink glasses with your hostess, legendary connoisseur Jennifer English, for intimate conversations, live tastings, product launches, and the happiest hour there is. Now, broadcasting live from the commodious confines of the swanky Proof Saloon, where the liquid elite meet. Here is your hostess, the Madam of Manhattans, the Duchess of Daiquiris, the Queen of Conviviality, your hostess, James Beard Award winner, Jennifer English.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Proof Saloon, where we welcome the most important, the most influential, and certainly the biggest names in the business. We're thrilled with the 2020 Proof Awards as they're shaping up, and this year we're welcoming some of the most acclaimed distillers participating not only in this year's awards, but as we persevere through this very challenging time of pandemic and quarantine, and as we reconsider and reimagine all the ways that conviviality comes to life for us in the public houses and the places we attend, and the important role that some of our traditions and rituals have. We're going to celebrate those today. And of course, as always, we want to remind you, please don't ever drink and drive. And all of us here in the Proof family want you to enjoy responsibly. We want you to get home safely. We want you to be well and stay healthy. And as always, everything in moderation. But I would rather see somebody enjoy something a very limited amount, because that elevates your experience. And I want you to imagine what it would be like to know and speak with the Distiller of the Year. Distilled spirits in general are a category of products. We're going to talk a little bit about that because the American Distilling Institute honored our guest today with the Distillery of the Year honors. We're going to be going now actually to a place in the country that's right now having a lot of challenges with the glass fire. And for those of us who've been in the business a long time, many of our friends are being impacted by the fires, and the role that the heroes that are fighting those fires are making to save some of the houses and vineyards and chateaus of some of our most beloved friends. People who are in this business are in it because we're called to be in service, and we're called to help make life's moments worth celebrating for our friends, our guests, and our customers and clients. And so it's in that spirit that we're going to go right now out to California, and we're going to talk to the good folks at Spirits Works. I hope you can see this. Spirits Works Distillery and the Distillery of the Year honors right here. We're going to be talking with Ashby Marshall from Spirit Works. Welcome. How are you? And how are you all holding up? How close are the fires to you?
You know, for us, they're about 15 miles away. So there's a good distance, and there's unfortunately many towns in between here and there. But, you know, I really appreciate you mentioning that and thinking of our community during this time. We like to think of ourselves as Sonoma strong, and we get through everything. This has definitely been a challenging year.
Let's talk a little bit about the sense of community, because it's moments like this when we're challenged that we can really stop and highlight the fact that we really are one food family. The crisis we face nationally in the pandemic, where 60% it's estimated of our restaurants might never reopen or survive the economic impact of this. We're already in the number 8 on the 10 count on the mat, so to speak. We really are struggling. Would you, as someone in the industry and who's really not only in it from that standpoint, but now with yet another knockout punch being delivered by the fires, address on behalf of your brothers and sisters in the industry what this means?
Absolutely. I think there's going to be a lot of changes, and I think of all industries to adapt and change. The restaurant and spirits and wine industry really are a great place for that. You see so many virtual tastings already happening, people really trying to shift and figure out how they can still interact with their community and customers while dealing with some not so fun situations on the side. You know, you see chefs around here who are, of course, making meals for the firefighters. A lot of distilleries, including us, made, of course, hand sanitizer during COVID when it was really bad around here. So you see that community come together a lot. And I just, you know, I wish the best for absolutely everyone. We're all trying to make it work.
Will you talk a little bit about when we think of California wine country, Napa country, Sonoma country, wine country, and then we talk about distilling and distilled spirits. They may sound like two very different communities, but the fact is we really kind of are all one community, one industry. Would you talk about how cohesive and collegial the seemingly disparate businesses are?
Absolutely, absolutely. We're particularly lucky because we are in a destination here in Sonoma County called the Barlow, and there are wineries and breweries that are within the community that we actually even do our production in. And that, I think what it starts from is that we're all making something from the earth. We're all using some sort of fermentable or some sort of food that is delicious and bringing that to people. And that everyone has the same passion behind bringing really delicious, good quality spirits, wine, food to everyone that's around Sonoma County and Napa County. And it's just a lovely place to be able to enjoy that with people.
You know, I want to take this opportunity to have you talk about what the difference is in terms, not just into the technical sense of craft, but what's really the difference between the process of winemaking and distillation?
Let's see,
I know
the
it's a big
easy.
question.
No, it's good for me. So fermentation takes you to a certain level of alcohol proof. So a beer will tend to be between 5 or 8% alcohol, and that's made with grain. Wine, you get up to 12 to 15 on average. So you're looking at that fermentation. And then distilling does this beautiful thing where we'll take that fermentation, put it into a still, and extract that alcohol to a much higher proof. And so we're getting the essence essentially of that base grain or grape that we started with. And that's go ahead.
No, will you talk about the process of distilling in the Americas? And I think that people have historically forgotten that when the grapes came and when some of the settlers landed in California, some of the other traditions that came included things like brandy making and maybe even distilling. And you've of course got the miners and the 49ers and the gold rush era and all kinds of Wild West activities. Will you talk briefly about the tradition of distilling in California?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the tradition of distilling in California is the same anywhere that there is grape and grain fermentations going on. You want to achieve another beautiful form of what this great product has made, what the natural ground has created for you. And so here in California, we have so much bountiful, beautiful, ripe, wonderful fruit and grain that we can work with. And the very simple process is to get that into a still and extract the very pure essence of what you've managed to extract from the earth itself. And it's been a fun process for us to be a part of.
I'm going to shift gears just slightly because as somebody who's been broadcasting on the radio and loves radio for as many years as I have, decades in fact, I can't help but notice the image behind you is that of a sound wave. And I have sat in many editing studios preparing radio shows and commercials and interviews, and I'm very familiar with what that looks like. But I can't seem to, for the life of me, imagine why a distilling house is going to have sound waves as their motif, unless this is your strict podcast studio. And I want to give
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's actually really cool. The virtual world that we're in these days is showing a lot more people this that's up in one of our offices than we ever have been. So in the very short version of the story is back in the day, my husband and I, the first gin that we bottled, we of course made a gin and tonic with it, and we had the idea to record the sounds of the bottle being opened, the gin being poured, the glass, the ice into the cup, and all the way through the process. And then back when we had a little bit more time on our hands before the still was actually totally installed, we managed to put this up on the wall to record that, and we can play the audio with it along so you can kind of see what happens as it goes. The best part is the fizz at the end as you add the tonic.
You know, one of my favorite questions to ask anybody in the hospitality industry is, what's your favorite toast? What's the toast you share with your guests when they come to your home or you clink glasses? And I've never imagined that the toast could be something other than words. And I
You
wonder
know?
if the sound of that could be, in fact, your house toast, just the sound of that first expressive moment of distillation success.
Absolutely. That's a wonderful idea. You know,
Hey,
we do tie in music to the rest of the distillery. We're kind of known for playing specific music to our whiskey barrels as we go. So there's a lot of musical elements around here you'll find.
I want to get to that, but let's get back to the American Distilling Institute and Distillery of the Year. Uh, to get to that point, you've had to have done some remarkable things. And I'd like to go from, how did you get from the start to there? How did you end up in the distilling business? And we're going to talk about one of your classic products, your straight rye whiskey, in just a moment. Again, a spicy rye that makes wonderful Manhattans. But I wanted to give you the chance. How did you get into the whiskey business?
Let's see. I came from an environmental background, so did my husband. And so we're still trying to figure out a way to work with the earth and do it sustainably and productively. And his family had actually, he's from England, and they had made traditional sloe gin, not on a commercial scale, but they certainly went out and harvested the berries and joined that with gin and produced a family made sloe gin. And we recognized that there was no real sloe gin that people really loved here in the US. And we thought maybe this was the opportunity for us to bring something traditional and beautiful to the US, like our sloe gin that we now have. So now we're the producers of the only traditional sloe gin in the US using real organic sloe berries.
And,
And I think that's a cool part of our distillery, is to make sure that you always create something unique and special as well.
one of the things I have to point out is that everybody that is familiar with and has connoisseurship in the realm of food and drink will know the phrase sloe gin fizz. It's even used, I think, in some silly cartoons at some point. But the fact is, most of us have never even had a sloe gin fizz. We understand that the fizz is a type of cocktail. And most of us that don't have roots somewhere in the United Kingdom or travels there or any experiences might not even know that it comes from sloe berries. Not
Exactly.
It comes from sloe gin, of course, but the sloe gin comes from sloe berries. What is a sloe berry, and why don't more of us know, especially in this time when produce is prolific and rare and specialty produce, thanks to Melissa's, has been exponentially available in our markets? How come we still don't, have a fruit plate with sloe berries on them?
The simple answer is the sloe berries come off the blackthorn bush, and those are actually considered invasive in the US. So they're not readily grown here. In England, they're grown, and all over Europe, actually, they're grown like a hedgerow around farms because they actually have thorns and things. So they work like a fence. And then they produce this fruit once a year called the sloe berry. The sloe berry itself is really tart and astringent. And is a stone fruit. So while it's the size of a blueberry, it also has a stone in it. But what we found is working with making our sloe gin is a liqueur, which has some sugar added. And so working with a fruit that's bright and tart and astringent lends itself really well to making a liqueur and not being oversweet at the same time.
So take us through we're going to taste this as the judges will and do. We're tasting, and again, we're doing this in a neat glass. These are the official tasting sip glasses for the Proof Awards. And I don't know, how would you say people should discover sloe gin? I mean, one of the top products from the Distiller of the Year. How could we best introduce this product to our listeners and our guests?
To our listeners and guests, I would say the first way, if you have a good sloe gin like ours, definitely try it on its own. It's shrunk like a port after dinner in the UK. And then the most relevant way that we think is really popular is to use our sloe gin as a replacement for sweet vermouth in any cocktail. So like a Negroni or a Manhattan, it goes incredibly well. The slight herbal notes from the gin, but then that real tartness from the sloes just adds a beautiful element to cocktails.
The Slows sound like a band I might have listened to in the late 1980s when I had an edge to me and a little bit of youth.
Yeah.
I love that name, the Slows. I hope
The
some
sloes.
band picks that up. They
Yeah,
would have
they're
come out of the British punk scene, the Slows.
totally. They'd be
Don't
popular
you
around here
think?
too.
That was Adam Ant's first band, the Slows. I'm just teasing about that. Let's talk a little bit about how your firm established the portfolio that you have available. We've only got two things that we have in front of us today, and I do have to note that the aromatics and the fragrant florals, they smell more floral than fruity in this. I mean, there's a certain fruity note for sure.
Sure, sure.
And when you talk about stone fruit, you have to go into the direction of things like plums, and there's a really plumlicious kind of note to the aromas in this.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is that citrus, and then it's quite tannic as well, because the skins and the stones are in there a little bit, which I appreciate the balance there.
And the citrus notes in that are really bright. It's almost like a cross between a plum and a Meyer lemon.
Totally. You know, the one other special way to use this is, instead of a Kir Royale, do a slow Royale with a little bit of sparkling wine, and it's just perfect in there.
I bet that would be yummy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the whole portfolio that you create. How many distilling actual stills, and what sort of stilling process do you use? Are you using the copper pot stills that I have in some pictures, or have you expanded to include other modalities as well, and why that matters?
We were very lucky in the beginning. We knew that we were going to make a variety of spirits. So we actually have what's considered a hybrid pot still. So it's the ability to use it just as a pot still. And then we also have a rectifying column to distill up to, there you go, 190 proof spirits. And so that from the beginning, we knew we were always going to be grain to glass. So our facility uses organic red winter wheat for the base for our spirits. And our goal was to make the slow gin. That was our initial, bring this beautiful slow gin to the US market. But since we wanted to do grain to glass, we had to make a beautiful vodka to make a beautiful gin to then make a beautiful slow gin. And so we were already 3 spirits deep, just trying to get to our first one. But it gave us that opportunity to really perfect vodka, gin, and then our slow gin. And then we also have a shorter column on the side, which we sometimes use for our various whiskeys. And you have your rye whiskey in front of you there, which is everything here at the distillery is aged over 4 years, all full-size barrels, and it's just growing and growing in popularity.
And we want to show the entire line. I know Michael's probably got a more photogenic way of showing that with a screen capture. But one of the things I'm really struck by, and for people who have been students of this, the height of the still and the little windows along there. Would you talk briefly about how you came to be so ambitious? Because that to me is one of the great symbols and significance of ambition in an operation like that. I mean, that's very unusual. And we should talk about that. Had to have been one of the things that blew away the judges at the American Distilling Institute, who awarded you Distillery of the Year. Is anybody else even doing anything remotely like that?
I mean, people do have 21 plate columns and have some beautiful stills out there. But I think a good point is that you may have a beautiful still, but it's very important to know how to run that thing very well and to get the spirits that you want out of it. So yeah, our ambition, I would say it comes down to a little bit of, like, I've done this all with my partner, Timo, my husband, and I don't think I could have done it alone. There's also the incredible team that we have here, and you absolutely cannot have any success without the people who are working with you. So we've been super lucky that way.
When you originally were talking about gin and tonic and distilling gin, it's very understandable, especially if you have family members in a tradition in the United Kingdom where that's a very rich part of the tradition. But you're also producing whiskeys, an expression of the grain of the land in the region where you are. What led you to become a whiskey producer, especially in a place that lends itself more towards the idea of grapes and wines?
Absolutely. I personally have always been a huge fan of the intricacies of whiskey, and the concept that I was even going to be close and remotely near a still meant that I was 100% going to be making whiskey. And we have such access to amazing grain. Our first whiskey that we put out was 100% organic red winter wheat whiskey. And it was because we wanted to represent that terroir of California in the grain as opposed to in the grape. So you're still getting really nuanced flavors that come from the grains that you're using. And it was just, you can't keep me from making whiskey. I think that's the summary.
Towards that, I want to talk about the fact that winter wheats are some of the most food-friendly spirits, and that you cannot make anything in California without it being companionable to the cuisine of the place. We say if things grow together, they go together. And it's certainly the case that part of what makes this spicy, delicious, distinctive California whiskey a new world whiskey in a way that the rest of the world is going to pay attention to, is that it does several things. And I think it's got several personality characteristics and flavor traits that are worth noting. Will you talk a little bit about some of the things that you hoped this would yield and produce, and how close to the bullseye did this come for you all?
You know what? That whiskey at the age that it is now is right at the bullseye that we were aiming for. We really wanted to bring something that doing grain to glass really brings forward the flavor of the grain itself. So we wanted less of the barrel input and more really for people to be tasting the difference of grains, which is why we produce 3 different types of whiskey, so that you can taste a wheat, a rye, and a bourbon. Here at our space to taste the differences between those. And with this rye, I think it's really special because you do get the spice and a little bit of cardamom spicy notes that you'll expect. But then we also use some specialty brewing malts that really round out the end of it and bring a hint of sweetness to the end, which is a little unusual for ryes, but something we were absolutely aiming for.
And again, in the world of spirits, you might think of sweetness, and you'd automatically think of things like the corn-based Kentucky bourbon whiskeys that go in a very sweet range. But in fact, most whiskeys will have a sweetness to them. You
Absolutely.
just have to find them. And
it's that subtleness.
You certainly explored a series of techniques that allow them to shine in this expression. When we start having the conversation about New World spirits and New World whiskeys, I think it's very solid for us to say this is a great expression. Do you think California whiskeys are on the cusp of becoming a regional category themselves? Do you think there's enough distinction in the terroir to make us begin to appreciate this?
You know, I do believe that, and I think you will have to be careful with California whiskeys produced in California versus also using the grain from California, because that's where that terroir, of course, comes from. But absolutely, I think more and more California whiskey is becoming its own known entity with that terroir that comes with it, and I look forward to more people recognizing that.
Will you take us through just the sniff on this, because the aromatics on this are astonishing.
Absolutely. I mean, I know first off that I get off of the nose is that cedar and leather right away. It's really recognizable. It kind of makes me feel like I should be cozied up in a couch somewhere, really, really getting ready to get into the taste of that whiskey. So the rye really comes forward with the cedar and leather. And then as you get into the palate, it's a little bit of a hint of tobacco, but also some stone fruit, which is maybe a little surprising to some people. That's that little hint, subtleness of sweetness. And then a little bit of caramel, of course, which you'll notice some of. We really enjoyed that rye whiskey.
And again, I know we've gone a little longer than we expected to today, and so I'm going to beg you and the audience for some forgiveness, but we did need to visit about the glass fire before we went too far into this.
Absolutely.
I have to note that this really is one of the most astonishingly surprising food-friendly spirits we've come across in a very long time. This is the kind of spirit that when you either sip it on its own or in a great Manhattan, and I think it really lends itself to that expression, that it becomes a very companionable flavor. But what I'd really like to point out is that a spirit like this in a very tall highball sip is a very companionable pairing for an entree. Especially an entree that has big, bright flavor. And I want to suggest, especially when we're talking about California now, and it's almost impossible to resist. But when I think of California cuisine, and I think of the kinds of things that people like Alice Waters and Jeremiah Tower and Jonathan Waxman were originating, that I can tell you, I would imagine they wish they had this to pair with when they were pairing those foods. This could be the greatest roast chicken highball in history, especially if it's seasoned a la, Jonathan Waxman or Jeremiah Tower. Those are the kinds
Totally.
of flavors, those big, crispy skinned, sagey, California, herby, delicious flavors. And as a sipping with some bubbly water, I just think it would be sensational. The spicy notes really are just wonderful.
As a distiller, you're winning my heart over. I think everyone should try the spirit so they can really taste it, and that's the perfect way to taste whiskey.
Is in that kind of expression and with food. And again, if you wanted to talk about something, the other thing this makes me crave, you're going to laugh when I say this. There's a place not far from you called Hog Island Oyster Company.
Of course.
And
Absolutely.
the Hog Island Oyster Company oysters, when you roast them out on a grill, like a Weber grill on the fire, I think this may be one of the best sips for Hog Island oyster roasted oysters.
You know what? That happened a year ago, and you have nailed it. It was absolutely wonderful.
So I can't let you go without asking, do you have a house toast aside from the one on the wall behind you?
Besides from that, we do. My husband and I are both sailors. That's our background. So to everyone, we wish you fair winds and following seas.
Cheers.
And,
Need a push getting your spirits, wine, or beverage brand into the hands of consumers? Interested in winning medals like a double gold award? Proof Awards 2020, the ultimate beverage competition, can help jumpstart your brand into the hands of beverage buyers. Enter the Proof Awards. Be a part of the Proof Awards marketing campaign with our partner, Food and Beverage Magazine. All of our judges are buyers, and that's what sets our awards program apart from the others. Our judges head the beverage programs for restaurants, bars, nightclubs, casinos, liquor stores, big box retail, and national wine and spirits distributors. Your brand will be tasted by buyers from more than 15 states across the U.S. We have hundreds of categories to choose from at www.proofawards.com. Be seen by 12 million readers with our partner, Food and Beverage Magazine. Get tasted and rated by buyers. The 2020 Proof Awards competition is open for spirits, wine, and beverage brands today. Proof Awards 2020, moving brands into the marketplace. www.proofawards.com